School, where the caller reported the sounds of gunfire from what they believe to be the roof area of Topsail High School. Our patrol deputies responded. By that time, there were about 16 or 17 students, athletic members of the Topsail High School group that were at the school for practice. They were evacuated from the building to neighboring Topsail Middle School. The officers did hear what sounded like gunfire coming from the rear area of the school, and to the officer that responded, it sounded like it was coming from the roof line. We immediately began a response of our agency as well as all local agencies. We sent out a request for mutual aid to neighboring counties. We had state and federal agencies that responded to assist. Sometime later into the morning, after checking the area, we were able to get officers onto the roof of the building. We did not locate any spent shell casings. We never had any report of any injuries or of any persons being shot. At one point, we found out about a possible water heater that had been making a noise since Hurricane Fran. That's the first we had heard of it. We continued to search the building. We sent multiple teams in, special response teams into the school to clear the school room by room. Again, we've never found any victims. We never found any persons that had been injured. We never located anybody that had actually seen a shooter. We were able to get maintenance folks at the school to the hot water heater. They re-energized that system, and it recreated the noise that sounded just like gunfire. I don't know the exact time frame that we were able to determine fully that was what was in fact the cause for the response this morning. But as far as the sheriff's office, we responded. We got the students out of harm's way. Thankfully, we didn't have any injuries. But I'll turn it over to Superintendent Hill now at this time to speak to you further about those facilities.
Good morning. Just want to say I can't thank emergency services and the law enforcement agencies enough for turning out the way they have. This has followed the procedures that we've been training for. This school has actually been through an active shooter training. We did have some students on site this morning that came out for an athletic event to train. They followed procedures, they followed common sense over procedure, and immediately removed themselves from the building, locked down at the nearest safest building, and they are now safe and back in school, or either being reunited with their families if they want to go home. Just can't say enough about that. Prior to the captain coming up here to speak, I got an update on the hot water heater. It's new damage. Basically, there's a combustion chamber in the bottom of these heaters, and the device had malfunctioned in there, allowing a ignition of the gas to come through. It is a little more powerful, and when it hits a relief valve, it does sound like a weapon going off when it echoes through the chimney, the relief port. Myself, I was an SRO officer when I started in education, and I've been very familiar, was on the SWAT team, very familiar with gunfire, and I can concur with Captain Rao that it absolutely does sound like a weapon going off when it exits the pipe at the top of the building. It sounds like that. So we've cut that off, isolated that water heater, and there will be no more noise from that water heater until it's fixed or completely repaired. So at this time, we're just happy to say it's a mechanical malfunction, and everybody's safe, the kids are safe, and now we're just getting our kids back to school. We will have a half day. We're going to run a late day and try to get a second part of our day in, especially since we're trying to overcome a month and a week of school that we've missed through the hurricane. If the parents want to take their kids home, we're going to work with parents, especially the kids that were on lockdown today. We understand that they may want to have a little bit of time to themselves. But other than that, we're going to try to get school back on and get back to normalcy. I just can't say enough, though, that training worked, emergency services worked. We thank everybody who came out, and we just want to thank everybody who's supporting the school system. Thank you so much.
Hey, I'm Carson Smith. I'm the sheriff here in Pender County. You've kind of, I guess, heard the general synopsis. I'm going to weigh in on a few things. Number one, of course, when I got the call this morning, worst thing in the world, thoughts start going through your mind. It was interesting, it was so early. It's not like the school day was on. I knew it wasn't a school full of kids, but there certainly are some faculty members here, and there are some, it sounds like some athletic folks here that early in the morning. What I heard when I got here sounded like gunfire. I don't want anybody to think that the students or the first officers that arrived on scene maybe overreacted. It was, and what we found out is a gas combustion. It sounded just like gunfire. Everybody that treated it as gunfire and reacted that way did exactly what they should have. We had the ones in the school, as Dr. Hill said, they've been through a lot of this training, especially recently. They immediately took cover, hunkered down, locked themselves in. They started making contact with us. We knew where they were because there was so few of them. And matter of fact, Dr. Hill was on the scene pretty quick and had already made contact with some of the teachers, and we started explaining what we knew. All indications were the noise was coming from the roof area. So the first officers did make it up to the roof area and didn't see anything. We had already called for Sable, the helicopter, regional helicopter that's based out of Wilmington, to come. When they got here, we kind of cleared the roof. We didn't see any threat whatsoever on the roof, so we took a whole team on the roof. When we got there, didn't find what we think we would have found if it would have been an active shooter, meaning many shell cases, because there were so many what the folks thought were actually firearm bullets being shot. There was nothing up there. We did have some indication at some point during the morning that there had been some sounds coming from a hot water heater in previous days. Obviously it was nothing this loud or whatever, and it sounds like they may have had another malfunction with that. But I just want to say, when I arrived on the scene and what I heard, I thought was gunfire too. So everybody did exactly what they should have done. I do want to say something about the response. Most everybody that showed out here, and I haven't counted yet, but it had to have been a couple hundred law enforcement officers here. Most of them were in their beds, and it didn't take them long to mobilize, get their equipment, get connected with their teams, and by the time we finished, even after we had reproduced the hot water heater sound and really felt that's what we had, since we had several SWAT teams here, we went ahead, split the school up, run the SWAT teams through just to clear the building, just to be sure nothing there. But several state agencies, from Wildlife to Highway Patrol to SBI, federal agencies, ATF and the FBI, they knew about it, they were contacted, they were on the scene, they had more resources coming that we actually turned around. So what you see was a huge response that, looking back, you can say was unnecessary, but number one, for me, it was very gratifying to see the huge response that really got here very quickly. And it is a blessing to all of us that it was not any type of active shooting situation, and it was just something that something you don't think about really causing this much havoc to a day. The superintendent also said they missed a lot of school, so all the agencies involved, we really made it a priority not to try to debrief, not to try to hang around and sort of go through, and we're going to debrief in another location. Because we really want them to get this school going again. They've got a lot of school days to make up, and it affects, as you know here, there's 3 campuses that are almost right on top of each other: Topsail Elementary, Topsail Middle, and then Topsail High School. I'll let Ben David, the district attorney here, I'll let him say some words, and then after he's done, I'm going to have any questions to try to take notes. Thank y'all.
Good morning. Ben David, District Attorney for New Hanover and Pender Counties. Today turned out to be a test, and the students, their teachers, and most importantly the men and women of law enforcement passed that test. I also heard those shots, not just over the scanner, but when it was being reproduced, and I can tell you that it absolutely sounded real. These young people did not overreact by immediately perceiving it as a threat and doing what they were taught to do through so many drills that we've had with our students. They did not allow procedure to override common sense. They actually left that building in many cases, our high school, and went to a nearby school to shelter in place there. They locked themselves in. The men and women of law enforcement, I want to stress this, they train for these moments. They are at the shooting ranges. We had simulations even in government centers and in school buildings. They didn't think this was a drill. They thought it was the real thing. So I want to say something about what I saw. I saw, as the sheriff mentioned, over a dozen different police agencies joining forces and linking arms. I saw over 100 officers, certainly, who were there from state, local, and federal, all coming together from New Hanover County, Pender County, even north of here in Onslow County. I saw FBI, SBI, I saw all the local agencies who I advised to doing what they were trained to do. We've all heard those stories where officers who have perceived a threat in school kind of hung back and didn't know what to do. That's not what happened here this morning. There were no less than 20 officers who, when they believed there was an active shooter on that roof, ran to the sound of gunfire. Let me repeat that because that's so important that I think people remember. You know, these men and women in law enforcement are heroes. We pay them to take risks that the rest of us don't have to take. And you never know how they're going to respond until they really are in a situation. They perceived that deadly situation and they went and did their job. Thank God it turned out to be a malfunctioning water heater and not a shooter on that roof. But they didn't know that until they were inside. I had one officer with the SWAT team tell me that he didn't have his helmet and one of his partners gave it to him as they were running towards that building. I mean, what more can you say about the men and women of law enforcement except they did their job this morning, and so did these young people, so did their teachers who we encountered. We obviously understand that our children are our first priority. Their safety is everything to us. I talk to Topsail High School every year, just as I do to all the high school students and middle school students in my district. And I stress to them that we take jokes very seriously, that if they ever believe they're in trouble, they need to call 911. They did that. And what I tell the more than 1,000 men and women of the New Hanover and Pender County law enforcement community is, we have a job to do. We all work together. There's no jurisdictional boundaries when there's an emergency. In this, more than anything I've seen in almost 14 years now that I've been the DA, tested the system and we passed. And so I think that is the overriding message today. I'll be glad to answer any questions also, but I just wanted to say something I didn't think the sheriff would say or that Stephen would say, and that is, you know, these teachers, these law enforcement officers, they have jobs, they don't get paid a lot for it. They do it because it's a calling, not because that it's just a profession for them. And what I saw today across the boards is something that should make this community very proud and remind everyone in this country, because we know the country's watching, that we should all live in a place where we take these kinds of threats this seriously. Thank you.
Yes, I'll step back. Are there any questions any of us can answer you have? Yes, ma'am.
So it sounds like that water heater reacted multiple times. Do you know how many of those booms that you heard or the students heard? It sounds like there's more than just one.
I heard dozens, and there were folks here before me. When I was coming, and that's something we're going to try to do, maybe get some audio in case if you're interested, just to kind of hear, even the officers keying up the radios, you could hear it in the background. And when you're responding to something like that, then you hear it. It really did sound, it sounded like gunfire. And that's just what I want to stress. You know, something, a lot of times people might be second guessed for overreacting, but nobody overreacted here. Every single law enforcement officer I spoke to that was here before the noise had stopped thought it was gunfire.
And what eventually led to it stopping? Did it just run out of gas?
One of the teams got in once we didn't find any evidence of a shooter. We didn't see one. We didn't have shell casings. We didn't have any folks that were hurt or anything. So we started thinking of other things. One thing that that had been talked about was that a water heater had been making some noise. I don't think anything like this. It couldn't have been. I mean, not in school day. They would have known about it. So we sent a team in to actually cut the water off. The noise went away. Now, we were still extremely careful at that point. That was not a coincidence. We maintained the perimeter and cleared the roof at that time. And then we went back after we really thought that was a good possibility, something we had to rule out. We went back and recreated by opening up that water valve again, and the noise that ensued, some of the officers that were first on the scene identified that and said, yes, that's what we heard.
I mean, just yesterday we had this situation. You heard that this was a potential active shooter. What was going through your mind and what was going through your heart?
The first thing was, my God, I hope it does not occur here. You don't want it to occur anywhere, but when it hits home and it's something that's possibly happening in your county or your city, it may be people you know. And I definitely knew it was people that I knew that were going to get there before me and maybe have to encounter it. When as I was driving in, as I said, the deputies and officers that were keying up their mics, you could hear it in the background. So it sounded real. I thought it was real, and at that point, I didn't close my eyes, but I said a prayer while I was driving that this situation, I thought it was a shooting, so that nobody was going to get hurt.
And when you arrived, you still thought it was a shooting? At what point did you realize that it likely was? Were you inside the building?
I've lost track of time. No. When I got here, we had a lot of people in. I kind of set up a command post. The command was actually still being run from inside the building. So we had the event was going to get a whole lot bigger than that. So I pulled back, started the command post on St. John's Church Road, which is the road going into the high school.